Hello and welcome back to Vox Terra. Shalom, salam. Two words sound very similar. So today we're going to consider the bloody attack from Hamas into Israel, and we're going to consider the bloody and brutal counter siege and bombardment currently of the Gaza Strip by Israel. And we're going to put it in what I believe is underreported context of often Jewish voices for peace, as well as Palestinian and Arabic, and underreported history of the whole region. So the history that I think very few of my fellow Americans are aware of, and that I myself, I don't know that I ever learned this in school. What do we really learn in school? Is that a long time ago in the ancient times, there was the land of Judea, the home of the Jewish people. Well, that land of ancient Judea was conquered by the Roman Empire. Well, between around 66 and 135 AD, there was these Jewish-Roman wars, culminating in the Roman victory, purges of Jewish neighborhoods and communities, I believe the destruction of Jerusalem, the deportation or the pushing out of many Jewish people out of Judea. The Romans in 135 AD renamed it Palestina or Palestina, Syria. This was known by many Jewish people and many historians as the Great Diaspora. Well, as far as I'm aware, it wasn't until the late 19th century there was a movement called Zionism, or a return to the old homeland. Now, interestingly, Zionism should really be put in context of all of the really interesting sort of alternative lifestyle, alternative community, alternative religious movements occurring within the late 19th century. And it was in 1917 that Great Britain, then controlling Palestine, which they gained control of it by the defeat of the Ottoman Empire, made something called the Balfour Declaration, which stated Britain's support for a Jewish homeland within Palestine. So 2 points here, or a couple points here. One is you're looking at nearly a 2,000-year gap from when it was Judea to the beginning of the Zionist movement, or the return to the old homeland. 2,000 years that those people who are now the Palestinians had been living there. Another point you might want to consider that not all of those original Jewish people were deported or left. Many must have stayed and simply converted or joined in with the new populations. Please note that there are some within the Jewish community who believe the state of Israel should not exist, as the Messiah has not come yet, and therefore do not even support Zionism and the return to Israel. Zionism was a relatively slow process up until, guess who? Hitler. And the rise of the Nazis in Germany, or the rise of ethnic nationalism in Germany, with putting Jewish people as a targeted group to, in my opinion, protect the wealthy business interests of Germany from the left who would have wanted to have redistributed the wealth. So it was within the context of the rise of Hitler that then Zionism began to increase. Well, with the increasing immigration to Palestine came increasing tensions. Well, here many people I've heard put 1948 as a key year. Citing to Al Jazeera, it was around 1948 when Israel declared its nationhood. It was attacked by Arab neighbors. Israel repelled the attack, pushed out somewhere around 750,000 Palestinians. There was a lot of destruction of Palestinian towns and villages. Israel, according to Al Jazeera, grabbed up about 78% of historic Palestine, leaving the remaining 22%, what is now the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, as occupied territories. This event is known to Palestinians as the Nakba, or the Great Catastrophe. Now, currently the situation in the occupied territories has been described as a pressure cooker. That specific term I heard by historian and author of the 100 Years' War Against Palestine, Rashid Khalidi, who I believe is also a Columbia professor. He describes the Gaza Strip as having 2.4 million people cooped up into one of the most crowded places on earth. I've also heard the Gaza Strip described as an open-air prison. Rashid also described that in recent years that pressure cooker has been intensifying, that there's been many killings of Palestinians over the past year.
War crimes don't justify other war crimes, and we are about to see horrific war crimes. But I think there are two things that have to be added. This has to be put within a context. And the context is not just occupation. The context is settler colonialism and apartheid. The people of Gaza, the refugees in Gaza, originate in the areas where Hamas fighters were attacking in the last couple of days. Those were Palestinian towns and villages in 1948. The ethnic cleansing of Palestine led to the cooping up of what are now 2.4 million people in Gaza.
Rashid describes settler violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. But so too here, to all of these points, there are Jewish voices for peace as well, describing the same situation. One is Israeli journalist Gideon Levy.
That the southern front with Gaza was totally abandoned because we were busy with all the festivals of Sukkot, of those crazy settlers, guarding them, but not only guarding them, collaborating with them with their pogroms among Palestinians. We have clear evidence that the army saw the pogroms and did nothing.
Now, Amnesty International and many others have referred to the state of affairs within Israel as apartheid, meaning two systems for two peoples rather than one system applied fairly to everyone. And so too have Israelis, yet they go largely underreported and ignored, like Knesset member Ofra Cassif, who I also heard interviewed on Democracy Now! After the attack. And importantly, he himself lost a good friend to Hamas during that attack, yet he still speaks up for peace and ending occupation.
And even the occupation crimes, the crimes that Israel is guilty of, crimes of occupation, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, since the Nakba, those either cannot justify such a carnage. At the same time, nothing and absolutely nothing can justify the massacre that Israel carries out now in Gaza.
We, in a sense, the U.S., by having granted all these goodies to Netanyahu, are collaborating with a what he calls a fascist. Well, what might he mean by fascist here? Well, Ofra describes the Minister of Finance, and also he serves in the Defense Department, someone named Smotrich, as having written something called the Subjugation Plan, which Cassif describes as having three parts.
It was entitled the Subjugation Plan, which boils down to three. First, the Palestinian occupied territories should be annexed to Israel as a whole without granting basic rights to the Palestinians. Second, those Palestinians who do not agree to live under this subjugation are going to be expelled from their homeland. And third, those Palestinians who are going to resist are going to be killed.
And mentioning fascism or racial hatred towards Palestinians also was another Jewish activist named Orly, also interviewed from Israel on Democracy Now! Here she cited Tamar Benfield, who I believe is the national security head, was convicted some time ago in Israeli court for supporting a terrorist organization and inciting hatred against Palestinians.
First, it should be mentioned that Tamar Benfield was convicted with more than just hatred towards Palestinians. He was convicted with supporting a terrorist organization, so he's a convicted supporter of terrorism.
Now, this pressure cooker-like existence is what Hamas themselves cited as part of the reason for the attack. Not, I believe, cited, but many pundits suspect as part of the reason was the sort of peace accord Joe Biden was trying to broker between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The reason why that would look so threatening to them is that if Saudi Arabia made diplomatic relations with Israel without having rights for the Palestinians, then a lot of the other Arab nations would follow suit, basically leaving the Palestinians hanging. Well, similarly here, I heard a Palestinian activist interviewed on Democracy Now! He actually, really interesting, pointed out part of the reason, at least this is how I interpreted his interview, why Hamas, this more extreme organization, has more power than like the Palestinian organization, who I believe was less extreme towards Israel. He attributes that to what he calls Israel's undermining or humiliation of the Palestinian Authority, really delegitimizing them, making them look weak in the eyes of Palestinians, in a sense, perhaps inadvertently propping up the more extremist Hamas, making them look stronger.
Hamas, as well as Jihad, are Palestinian political groups, militant groups that are not in the PLO. But there are problems even inside the PLO. I think now the PA feels totally marginalized. not only because of what's happening on the ground, but also because of Israel, that did everything to humiliate the Palestinian Authority.
But a second point here that Ofra Qasim and others were making is not just that this violence erupted out of this pressure cooker, but that this violence by Hamas will be used and is being used as a justification to do what he describes as the fascists within Israel wanted to do all along.
What we see now, and the coup, by the way, that the government of Israel has been carrying out within Israel, all of those are means to that goal. The goal is to realize this horrific, racist, colonialist, fascist plan of Smotrich's.
So it's been mentioned in the media that Egyptian intelligence tried to warn Netanyahu government about that, hey, Hamas is planning something big, and that this was ignored by the Netanyahu government. Now, the author of the 100 Years' War Against Palestine attributed that to arrogance on the part of the government. But I would like to point out that historically it has been the case that sometimes people who want conflict will turn a blind eye, knowing when something bad is going to happen, hoping to then have that justification for the war. Well, what's the takeaway from all of this bloodshed and violence? Well, one, I would like you to really consider, take a page from Nome Chomsky, and that's why I'm generally skeptical of these wars and conflicts. Consider how what the interests are, the business interests within the media, especially within the defense industry, as well as fossil fuel petrochemicals. Consider when we hear these one-sided narratives, who the reporters or news staff will use the passive voice with. There was an attack upon, and who they'll use the active voice with. So-and-so attacked. What victims they'll humanize. Here's the story of so-and-so and their family. What victims are just numbers. 25 people were killed. Consider the analysis, which is more of a Marxist analysis, if you will, of what interest ethnic nationalism and racism serves. Does it serve, as they would say, to distract from change at home, to keep those in power, and further the system as it currently exists? And to what extent are these wars and conflicts simply based on habit? By that I mean, you've got young people tuning into the media, hearing the one-sided narratives, getting a one-sided story of history told by their teachers. When they grow up, they take positions of power, they internalize this, they believe it, they think they're smart because they're simply aping or parroting what they've been hearing all along. And what I mean by that, it's important when you hear the call to war to realize that those in charge really may not know anything more than you do. They just act like they do. Okay, so you may be wondering, well, what's the solution? What would you do if you were in charge of things? What do you advise? Well, I think first of all, listen to those voices for peace in Israel that get ignored. Hear what they have to say. Second, just from what I know about this situation, I would say either one, you negotiate a two-state solution. You give away as much territory back to the Palestinians as you believe you can safely do, then defend yourself and be ready for any trouble that may ensue, but work as hard as you can for peaceful relations. The second honorable solution would be to, go ahead and annex those territories, but grant full rights to the Palestinian, including right of return to displaced Palestinians. Basically, you would have to give up the idea of Israel as a Jewish state. And then you would have to deal with what consequences would ensue from that. But those, I believe, are the only two honorable choices. Well, partner, I hope you found this show interesting, helpful. Let me know what you think about the different camera I'm using, the different microphone, the analysis, the tone and tenor of the voice, all of it. I'd love to get comments from you. If you disagree with some stuff, you think I got it wrong, fine, just state so politely in comments. Please subscribe, click that notification bell so you know when I'm putting up a new video. Please join my 2 donors at Patreon. I could really use more help to support this channel. This comes at a massive opportunity cost for me. And as always, until next time, peace be with you.